Hey, it's Johnny Rocket here at the Johnny Rocket Launchpad, launching ideas in your direction. Next up, we have Professor Aeon Skoble from Bridgewater State University. We're going to talk about human nature, rights. So stick around, listen to the Johnny Rocket Launchpad coming up next.
Information is free.
The law.
There is
The Johnny Rocket Launchpad. And now, here's Johnny.
Hey, it's Johnny Rocket here at the Johnny Rocket Launchpad, launching ideas in your direction. The Northwest's only rock and roll libertarian radio show. I'm here with my co-host, Mr. Kurt Nelson.
Yes, sir.
My voice of reason, the beautiful Heather Nixon.
Hello.
And we are coming from LibertyRadioNetwork.com, Random Times Radio, KSCR, Tuesdays, 2 p.m. to 4 p.m., NWCZ Radio, Friday, 4 to 6 p.m., Saturday, 8 to 10 p.m., LibertyTalk.fm, Saturday, Sunday, 7 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Liberty Movement Radio, Friday, Monday, 5 p.m. to 7 p.m., CMG Global Radio, Thursday, 3 a.m. to 5 a.m., Thursdays, InfoSub, Friday and Saturday, 1 p.m. to 3 p.m., iTunes, Twitter at JR Launch, and Facebook /JRLaunchpad.com.
Bam.
Bam!
Nice. Well done.
And the JohnnyRocketLaunchpad.com.
Oh,
man, I can't get, dude, it's tough.
Maybe we can catch that in an edit.
I'll get it. I'll get it now. We'll let it go. It's cool. You got to let it go sometimes.
Sometimes you got to let it go.
You just got to let it go. Anyway, so we're here at the beautiful Speed of Sound Studios. We have our very special guest.
I'm excited about this one. Man.
Yeah, he's awesome. He's awesome. I found him on learnliberty.org. I've been talking about this website for a while now.
You have.
And I'm absolutely blown away by how informative these videos are.
And you get T-shirts.
And you get T-shirts and shit. You know, if you're like, hey, I completed a course and I get a T-shirt, you know, it's cool.
That's cool.
Yeah, it's great.
Incentive.
There is a lot of incentive. And so a lot of these instructors and professors that are actually there at the Institute for Humane Studies, that's the main mothership, I guess, has reached out to a lot of these professors and said, hey, you guys are cool and you guys, teaching liberty. Let's talk to you. We're very honored to have Professor Aeon Skoble. Awesome. And so we have Professor Aeon J. Skoble. His book is Deleting the State, and his argument is against the Thomas Hobbes theory, also under public choice. He's a professor of philosophy at Bridgewater State University of Southeastern Massachusetts, from New York, and received his Bachelor of Arts from University of Pennsylvania and his Master's from Temple University.
Wow, man.
In 91, he was awarded the Claude R. Lambe, hopefully I'm saying that correctly, Fellowship from the Institute for Humane Studies as research into morality, political philosophy. He's a co-editor of the anthology Political Philosophy, writer on the culture and political philosophy such as Forrest Gump, Seinfeld, Lord of the Rings, superheroes, co-editor of Woody Allen in philosophy, and the best-selling The Simpsons and Philosophy. Is that correct?
Yeah, I've done a bunch of these popular culture and philosophy books in addition to my quote-unquote serious work in philosophy. The Popular Culture series is a neat little side project. It's a great way to introduce people to thinking about philosophy who might not otherwise get interested. It's a way to hook their interest in philosophy by using philosophy to talk about something that they're interested in otherwise, like science fiction movies or superheroes or popular shows like The Simpsons or originally Seinfeld.
Nice.
Right on.
So I've been really happy to do a bunch of those pop culture things.
Well, I think it's cool because it kind of gives the individual some sort of, they can relate to that. And then say, hey, for example, this was what happened in this episode of The Simpsons, or this is what happened in Seinfeld, or this is what happened.
It's like if I said, well, look, here's this academic book that I wrote, and here's a monograph based on my PhD dissertation, and people go to sleep. Look, let's talk about your favorite science fiction movie. Let's talk about The Simpsons. Let's talk about film noir, whatever. Then we're actually having a conversation. And then, the fact that there's philosophical ideas to be explored, then you're like, oh, that's interesting. Let's go, let's get more into that. And so then later I can have you read my doctoral work and other books and scholarly articles and stuff like that.
Right on.
That's really cool, man.
I think
Yeah,
it's great.
a gateway drug for philosophy.
Yeah.
This is a great analogy, though.
Yeah,
You know, you're like, how could I relate this to everyday people? Because I think that's the problem with a lot of liberty-minded individuals. We're so, a lot of the people are so up in their ivory tower that they don't relate to the common person. And
That's a problem. That's a problem for the liberty movement, and it's a problem for academic philosophy generally.
Sure. You kind of wonder if Matt Groening was ever writing The Simpsons and thought that it'd be a gateway to philosophy. That's pretty awesome.
Are you a science fiction and fantasy fan, or comic books, or?
Yeah. I mean, I was growing up. Those were my mainstays: superhero comics, science fiction, fantasy novels.
Yeah, me too, man. There's a lot of things, especially with Marvel comics.
Yeah,
There was a lot of.
I'm a Marvel guy from the late '60s, early '70s.
I was an '80s, '90s guy. Of course, X-Men had a lot of undertones that nobody really picked up on. Professor Skoble, in your opinion, do we need government?
Depends on what you mean by need.
Okay, this is cool.
People who like to have power over other people and force them to serve others, you make them do their bidding. They really need government. People who like to invade other countries, they really need government. If what you meant by that is, do regular humans need government in order to live together in peace and prosperity, then the answer is no.
So I'm assuming then maybe you take a minarchist position on government.
No, actually, I go all the way to 11 on that.
Nice.
Bring it up to 11.
I don't think that the state at all is necessary. However, I don't mind increments. I don't mind gradualism. So, I don't have any delusions that there's not going to be any government anytime in the next 20 years.
Okay.
But I think that we can use philosophical defenses of anarchism to reduce the scope of the state. And a more realistic hope is to have increased freedom in our lifetime. So, even though, like say 80 years from now, are we still going to have the government? Almost certainly, yes. So is that philosophically ideal? No. But if it's a more free society than what we have today, I'll call that a win.
I was talking to a friend of mine, Rob Stratton, today, and he said, well, there's things that it ought to be and versus what it is. And, in an utopia, yeah, sure, we may not need the state. But as of now, the state has limited function to protect our rights. How can we have social order without a government involved or a state of authority? Can social cooperation be obtained?
Well, examples of social order emerging without the state are all around us, not only in the history of the development of society, but even in the context of states. In areas where there isn't any direct government supervision, we still see orders developing. My favorite example is credit reporting stuff. And this was one of the examples I used in my video. That if I go to the department store and get a suit and charge it, there's a sense in which I could get away with a free suit because I could just not pay the bill when it comes. But the problem is then I'll never be able to do that again, because the next time I try to get free stuff, they'll say, oh, well, this guy doesn't pay his bills. He's a thief.
Right.
And so the idea is that they'll share information. It's not just that I can't go back to that store and get more free stuff. I can't go to any of the stores, because the place I robbed from the first time will tell all the other stores, hey, don't let this guy in. He's a thief.
Sure.
Now, you might think that these guys are competitors. So, since he screwed us, let's hope that he screws the other guy. But that's not their response at all.
Right.
They think that it's in their best interests to share that information about who's a good credit risk, who's a thief. And they're all better off when they cooperate in this shared information about credit risks. But this is something that merchants just came up with on their own. It's an example of evolved social cooperation that doesn't require imposition by central authority or central planning. They just came up with it, what they call a spontaneous order or evolved order. And so that's one of my favorite examples, because even though we have government and we have laws and we have the state, there's all sorts of things that are beyond its scope where we nevertheless see order emerging. People cooperate because it's a good thing to do. People find it in their interests to cooperate. It serves their mutual benefit.
Professor Skoble, you've used disaster relief as an example of natural societal order or natural order. Can you give us an example of that?
Well, it's not so much that the disaster relief is this order, but what happens is institutions that allow people to respond to problems are things that develop naturally. So let's say there's a terrible disaster in your town, people will respond to that because it's their town, right? So people will feel a sense of, these are my neighbors, and this is, kind of sympathy feeling that people have. It's a natural response. Now, the further away it goes from your neighborhood, the more removed it gets. So hear about disasters overseas, you often sort of, you say, oh, that's terrible, but there's nothing that you're going to do about it because it's 30,000 miles away. At most, you'll send a check to the relief organization or whatever. But it's not like you're going to feel this sense of immediacy, of urgency. You're going to run down and help out. But if it happened in your neighborhood, typically people actually do go out and help their neighbors. So one of the things is that governments can make you confused about what counts as your neighbors because of artificial borders that they draw, right? So if it happens in some other country, then you don't think it's your problem. Whereas if it happens in your country, it is your problem, even if it's 3,000 miles away. But I guess the connection to spontaneous order and disaster relief is government programs often exacerbate the very disasters that they're supposed to be helping alleviate. For example, the National Flood Insurance Program actually encourages people to build in flood zones. So then, of course, the next time there's a flood, you're going to get more property damage.
Okay.
Wow.
But then they get a nice vicious circle there because then they say, look at all these homes that get damaged in the flood. Of course, we have to have a national flood insurance program.
Right. Have an idea. Let's build our house right near a flood area.
So now, if you look at who is providing the relief, I think during Katrina, like Miller Beer was trucking in beer bottles filled with distilled water, that sort of thing. And many companies that were right nearby and already had established distribution chains to those areas were able to get supplies in relatively quickly. And, FEMA, of course, is still trying to figure out where to put the trailers. So there's typically a problem with bureaucrats working from a remote distance, don't always know everything on the ground that locally involved people would. Even if the company's not based in that area, they have distribution chains, and so they know where to bring the water and whatnot. There's some technical economic literature on this. My friend Stephen Horowitz, an economist who also does a lot of Learned Liberty videos, has written extensively on the role of private corporations in disaster relief.
I think it's just an interesting thing and how it can relate to spontaneous order. Let's talk about, I was watching a video that you had done, and you were talking about how value is different from the philosopher to the economist.
Yeah.
Could you kind of explain that to our audience? Because, hell, I don't even know what the hell you're talking about.
Well, it's a funny thing, because I used to get into all these arguments with my friends when I was an undergrad, because you learn a certain vocabulary when you major in one subject.
Right.
And then it turns out that people in other majors sometimes use words in a technically different sense.
Sure.
So I'm learning about objective reality in my studies of philosophy. And then all my friends who have been studying econ come up and say, no, value is also
right.
And
yeah.
So when they say value is subjective, to a philosopher, that sounds like you're some sort of moral subjectivist, and so it's okay if you want to be a cannibal, that's fine. Do what you're doing. There's no right and wrong. So if I want to marry a burrito or
marry a burrito,
kill people and drink their blood, then who's the judge? So that's insane,
right?
Yet these econ majors that I was hanging out with were not insane. So after a while, I figured out that this was just a translation problem. One of the things that can be true in philosophy, even though we want to think that there's some objective sense of right and wrong, we also recognize the fact of human pluralism, right? People have different interests, different tastes and preferences, different fulfilling pursuits.
Okay.
So humans, by their complex nature, are a pluralistic sort of thing. So it's not like there's a one-size-fits-all way to understand happiness or the good life. People are different and have different priorities, different levels of satisfaction for different sorts of things. Okay, so that's
absolutely.
We can talk about that and still have there be such thing as objective right and wrong. Right. That's what economists mean when they say value is subjective. Value in a more technical sense, like what is this cup of coffee worth? Well, it's not worth anything unless you specify to a person, right? Value presupposing a valuer. So it's worth, a quarter to this guy. It's worth $10 to this guy. It's worth nothing to this guy.
Right.
It doesn't have some fixed built-in value.
Sure.
the value of the coffee is what somebody is willing to pay for the cup of coffee.
Totally makes sense. It's a lot of the sciences have the same problem. The lexicon changes between different studies. You know, you have a geologist over here and you have a chemist over here. They're not talking the same language, and it's kind
Maybe
of like,
using the same words, but not talking the same language. Either,
right?
Right, that's why people will say, well, scientists will talk about something being a theory, which means they think it's as well settled as it could possibly be. But then, like lay people take theory to mean something that's a hypothesis. We're just guessing here.
What are some of the reasons why people can't find work nowadays? And you had a video on this.
Well, one reason people can't find work is because government literally makes it hard for them to get work, which is ironic given that they also then will help you with cash relief because you're unable to find work. But leaving that irony aside, a lot of occupations require special licensing to be able to do them, right? So one of my go-to examples here is like hairdressers, right? And to get a hairdresser's license in most states costs several $1,000s and dozens of hours of training courses for a skill that generally people can learn how to do in some sort of apprenticeship way. Like young girls learn how to braid each other's hair and whatever. They don't actually need to go to cosmetology school and spend some dollars to learn how to do this.
Right.
So occupational licensure laws, by making it prohibitively expensive for poorer people to enter those professions, cause them to not be able to find jobs. If you're already so poor that you're looking for any kind of a job, then if I say, well, you could do this job, but it'll cost you $10,000 in training costs, no one's going to do it. The whole premise here is that they don't have any money in the first place. That's why they need a job. So why are there those laws? The nominal justification is consumer protection, right? So people would all be getting their heads sliced off if there was this plague of unlicensed hairdressers, right?
They're rampant. They're running around and they're just cutting hair without a license.
Yeah, exactly. So people would be getting their throats slashed like crazy.
You're right.
Seems dubious that that's actually what would happen, right? If you even got the tiniest nick, then you would tell all your friends not to go there, and that person would probably go out of business. You're only going to keep going back to a hairdresser that you're happy with, that's doing a good job. So who does it actually benefit? It benefits the established hairdressing interests, right? What you'll find out every time is that the licensure regulations tend to be lobbied for by people that are already established in a particular industry.
Right.
And this creates barriers to entry for upstarts trying to enter the market who might undercut them in pricing.
I agree with you 100%.
Right on. Yeah,
that makes
me too.
Much like the woman, I believe it was in Colorado, who she came here from Africa and she was doing hair braiding and supporting herself. And next thing you know, she's told if she braids any more hair, she's going to be fined $3,000 a day.
Yep, exactly.
That's
absolutely ridiculous.
They literally make it hard for people to get work and then position themselves as a necessary assistance mechanism when people can't find work.
And the kicker to that story is that none of the cosmetology or beautician classes even offered hair braiding as one of their training classes, but she still had to do it to braid hair.
Sure.
It's ridiculous. What do you feel about driver's license?
Oh, I'm so glad you went there. I was going to ask that question.
Were you really?
Yeah. And even in general, automobile registration and that kind of thing, like as far as deep as that goes.
Well, my answer may surprise you, right? Since I've already indicated that, I favor anarchist approaches to things and that we don't need the state to do any of these things. You might think that I'd be anti-car registration and driver's licenses, but it's actually not that simple. Because if you're going to be, let's say we didn't have any government at all, somebody would still be the owner of those roads, right?
Sure.
And the road proprietor is going to have a perfectly legitimate interest in making sure that the people that use his road aren't going to be crashing into each other all the time, right? So if you owned a road, right? So let's say we wake up and find ourselves in anarchist paradise. So all the roads are privately owned.
Sure.
So now let's say you own one of these things.
Okay.
You're not just going to want it to be Mad Max. You're going to want people to use it responsibly.
Right.
So you might very well say, as the private road owner, look, no one's getting on this road unless they've demonstrated some sort of minimal level of competence at using, these 2-ton steel machines. So I would imagine that even in anarchist fantasy world, we would still have something like licensing for drivers. That is some kind of safety certification that makes the road owner feel comfortable letting people get on there. This would certainly be required by insurance companies.
So it would be
and
more of a private registration or a
Yes,
private
one imagines
show of skills in some way or whatever.
Yes, and there'd probably be competing agencies to offer this kind of safety
Okay,
certification.
sure.
So-
That makes
And
sense.
so as long as your car's transponder had in it, the chip that showed that you were authorized by one of whatever the 4 leading safety authorizing companies is, then you'd be allowed on that road.
Okay, sure.
Interesting. And I'm kind of with you on that in a sense, because I just don't like the word license. And I think that's what frightens me. It's like if you have a certification that you're capable of doing this, then you're good. But the license is the problem.
That's an excellent point. That's exactly the right distinction to make. Calling it a license means that it's entirely the government's prerogative. We will give you permission in our magnanimity. We will give you permission to do this, right? Whereas saying certification is just a way of one person telling another person, this guy's okay.
Right.
And if there's sufficient reputation on the person that's making that claim, then we can all feel good about that. And and again, this goes back to our business with the credit reporting in the department stores, right? Why would anybody trust anybody? Okay.
Right.
Their reputations are a commodity. So, for example, when you go to buy a toaster, you're going to look and see whether it's got that little UL symbol on it.
Sure.
Which tells you that some lab has certified that this isn't going to cause an electrical fire and burn your house down. But Underwriters Lab is not a government agency. It's funded by a consortium of insurance companies because they don't want your house to burn down either.
Same thing with, that's what we should be doing, though. Replace the FDA with that kind of system.
Exactly. Instead of talking about, I have a license to make toasters, rather, I make toasters, then I apply for the certification, and some independent company says, yep, this one's electrically sound. It's not going to burn people's houses down.
Right.
So now you go to the store, and there's one on the shelf that's got the UL thing, another on the shelf that doesn't. You're going to probably pick the one that does.
Right. And so we were talking like last week before we wrap up this segment, but I was saying that I was a helicopter pilot in the Army, and we were talking about you didn't have a license, Johnny, and I didn't. I never got a license. I flew helicopters for 4 years.
You were certified.
I was certified,
but
but I never had a license. And I never had one outside of the military. But guess what? I could fly a helicopter.
Because you're a military and you're a helicopter pilot.
But I was certified.
Right.
But I was not licensed. And I think it's the key difference. I think licenses of any sort are bullshit. And it hinders entrepreneurship, hinders people getting into a particular field. It hinders
that's exactly right.
You know what I mean?
I wish more people got onto that distinction between licensing and certification.
Yeah, and I think that's the big thing. It's like, yeah, we'd like to see that you can function and you're not going to kill anyone. But at the same time, we don't need, because I don't like the whole idea that you get pulled over in a car, right? And then your license gets suspended. Now, does that mean that you forgot how to drive? All of a sudden
your car won't start.
Your car won't start. You forgot how to drive because your license is suspended. No, it's bullshit. Anyways, this is Johnny Rockin' here at the Johnny Rockin' Launchpad, launching ideas in your direction, the Northwest only rock and roll libertarian radio show. I'm here with my voice of reason, the beautiful Heather Nixon.
Why are you messing with our heads?
I don't know. I'm just messing with you.
You did that out of order.
I did that.
You're supposed to say, yes, sir. And then I'll say, yes, sir.
Okay. And then Kurt's supposed to go,
hello. Hello.
Yeah, that's good. That's good. Yeah. Hey, we got my co-host, Mr. Kurt Nelson.
Yes, sir.
And we're here with Professor Aeon Skoble from Bridgewater State University of Southeastern Massachusetts. We're going to be right back. Stick around. We got Billy's Burns, whatever chaps his ass.